Tabletop will start after the following messages. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletop. Today we're talking about magic items. They're here, they're everywhere, and they're in all of our games. So let's talk about how to build them, how to use them, how to DM for them. And today I will be leading this conversation as your host, Nick, and I am a Cloak of Billowing. Who's this across the table from me?
Hi, it's Franco. I'm a Ring of Three Wishes.
All right, Daniel, what's up?
Hey, it's me, Daniel, and I am a pot of magic stew.
Okay, and what about you?
Hi, I'm Shade. I'm an Ion Stone of historical knowledge.
Ooh, okay. So as you can tell,
Somebody looked one up.
Yeah, somebody.
Yeah, someone didn't like saying he was a Ring of Three Wishes in our first try.
All right, here we go. So let's talk about magic items. We're going to talk about it in like a system agnostic way, but of course, magic items are most
Not if Shade can help it.
We can bring it to D&D 5e as our core.
Y'all try. You know what? I'm gonna be totally system agnostic. I can't wait to see you do 5e only.
Interesting.
Okay.
We got a challenge. A gauntlet has been thrown on this episode. So
A magic gauntlet.
oh boy, it's happening again.
Gauntlet of punching.
So what do you guys feel like when you're GMing or when you're trying to include magic items into your setting? What are the do's and don'ts? Because I know that, Daniel, you and I have talked about this, about how if magic items are not like accounted for, they can very quickly break a game. So let's go around and kind of talk about what you guys do, best practices for using magic items in your games.
I wish that I had a best practice, but I literally have to I feel like I'm winging it every single time I'm introducing a new magical item. Because I know it's like part of like the fun of playing like an adventure fantasy game is all of like the neat little toys that you can pick up. But it's also like, how many is too many? How many is not enough? And I feel like in my games, there's like sort of a lingering resentment because I've given and I've taken away.
Can I tell the story real quick?
Go.
So
He's done it more than once?
literally the first story that I was ever told about Daniel as a
It's this
DM. We were standing out on a plaza of a museum we both worked at, and he said, "Yeah, so my characters are getting like really powerful, so I made a anti-magic grenade to just break all of their shit." And I said, "Oh, do you think that they're gonna be mad at that?" And you went, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. They won't deal. They're gonna be fine." And then he walked away, and then Steven walked up and was like, "I would be so pissed." So that was what happened, right?
And that's true.
And
That's true.
and we were.
And there was a grudge that
Our friendship has never been the same.
I definitely mentioned not that, but just you early 2017, Daniel, and the desert of magic items.
Yeah, there was a time after that where you were like, "You guys all live in a magical world, but there's not a single fucking magic item, so don't ask for them anymore."
Yeah.
Amazing.
It was very fun.
It's not like that anymore, but there was a period.
I think the restrictions that I usually try to make kind of weak magic items because I think magic items can be very game breaking. Like sometimes they break a game so much that you want to destroy the items with a magic grenade for some fucking reason. Even though people have leveled up to the point where maybe it should be okay that they have those weapons. Yeah, I like to just make them kind of weak. Yeah. And I also like to be very vague about them so that I can try to feel out whatever's fair. Like if somebody wants to like try something out with something, then I'll be like, okay, let's think about whether that would work and then just like try to write more rules around it. Basically just like working backwards from like, here, what's the cool concept is like, I want a spear that will return or whatever. And it'd be really cool is if when I return it and it has stabbed a monster, it does damage on the way out too. And then we were like, is this too powerful? And we decided yes.
Because it's 2 attacks, yeah.
Yeah, it's too powerful. And so we were like, okay, maybe you can do it once per short rest.
Yeah.
Or sorry, long rest.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. You just like kind of limit it and you kind of work with the players as you're going along, and maybe that's a little bit too much like behind the curtain-y for some players. Like, you know, sometimes your players want you to be God and stuff, but I like to come down to earth with my players and tell them, hey, I'm also playing a game.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, because we had to do that with Bill Stabums when he had that pair of magical daggers, because it's like you can blink way too much.
Yeah, it was because like you built it so that it was that you could.
You should explain the item first.
Yeah, so the item were a pair of daggers that you could throw, but if you had both of them, even if you threw it like at a monster or something, you could either use a bonus action to teleport to the dagger, or use a reaction to have it appear back in your hand.
Yeah.
So it's like literally I could just throw this dagger across the map and be like, okay, I teleport over there.
Well, 2060, surely.
Yeah. And it was like, pop, I can just like, pop around and
But
do
still,
this.
like with the problem came up when like once he realized that he could throw one dagger like through windows or like in a passing carriage,
or like onto the top of a big monster.
or he could drop the dagger like 100 feet and then be on the bottom of a chasm without taking any fall damage.
Yeah.
It was like,
So good.
oh yeah, we definitely made this
Too powerful.
Powerful.
Too powerful.
Anything to do with teleportation. I think flying, like
That's another big one. The broom,
super OP.
your broom.
Oh, the broom was. I remember like after I gave you the broom and you just used it a lot. I was like,
This
flying.
breaks a lot.
Yeah, you
Flying
think
is
like
too powerful,
movement's
yeah.
not going to be too much of a big deal,
Yeah.
but once they have a magic item that like takes that and like makes the players like breaking physics, it gets real crazy. Real
I think
fast.
I took the broom away from you in a polite way.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
The giant took it, right?
So
Yeah, the Giants like confiscated it when they arrested you.
And then we dropped an island and it got lost.
yeah, exactly. Sora kind of.
I thought you got it back at some point.
She did eventually.
I think it was during the siege. You got back,
but it
Okay.
was.
We went through an
It was
arc
a
without
while,
it.
and
Yeah.
I mean, I understood entirely that it was, but I also would say like I had a negative con modifier for her, so like having her in the air was like, yeah, okay, no big deal.
No,
because-
I didn't. I think it was like it just really modified the way that I thought about how the game was running.
Yeah.
And I think with movement, shockingly a huge component of like. Or a huge like wrinkle that you can put into your games.
Yeah.
So I would advise like to be cautious with them.
What about you, Shade? How do you think about it?
Well, from a system agnostic standpoint, I have to say that I think of because we've been talking only about 5e, guys. Come on.
It's true. Well, I didn't. I've been keeping track. They have talked about 5e.
Listen,
Okay,
I haven't
movement
gone yet.
in what system?
Yeah, just any type of movement.
Any type of movement.
Any type of movement. What do you mean?
Every game has moves.
Yeah, like if you can move by flying, like that's huge.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
type
yeah.
of movement.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
okay.
I didn't say anything else.
Anyway.
Teleporting and flying. System
D&D
agnostic.
5e, the only game with movement.
Monster of the week does the movement.
stand
Movement's a lot
still
less
the
of a
whole
thing. That's
time.
all I'm saying. Anyway,
Never heard of
I look at magic items as really one of three categories. Number one, it's just fun and goofy. Number two, it modifies a character in such a way that it's either enhancing something they've already got going on, or it's giving them a whole new tool set to really expand. And number three, it is pivotal for the plot.
Yeah,
I love a story-tied magic item.
Story-type magic items rock.
I will say that one thing that
Riftbreaker.
I have always admired about the way you started the Waterdeep campaign was that you allowed us to kind of like futz with how we were taking like stat blocks and rolling and stuff. And instead of like re-rolling bad rolls or stuff, we could instead ask for a magic item that could like be comparable or help. And like the thing that I really love about it is that none of them were like super game breaky off the top. It was like Mark's, my character, has these bracelets that basically unfold Sherlock Holmes gun style into hand crossbows that are able to be fired and then go back. But the only thing that it really allows is that it shoots magical bolts and that I can hide them on my wrists. Literally everything else comes from the way I built my character and the feats that I took.
Right.
So like it actually, like even if I just had two hand crossbows, the only thing I am not able to do with those is hide them very well.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like that I felt like was a super cool way to get me to really buy into the character, because I was like, I fucking love the idea of this guy going around with these like, you know, little
That's funny.
Guns on his wrist.
I was very utilitarian with that, and I chose. I got a 5 strength.
Yeah.
Oh fuck! I fucked up. I had a 5 strength. Whatever. 5e is the only D&D. I had a 5 strength, and so I got the ring of protection.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, let me just boost all my defenses. So I was very mercenary about it.
Yeah. So like, and you know, different things for different types of players. Some people really want that ability, and that can be very a way for them to buy in. But I always thought, like, because I wasn't such a storied, I guess, DM at the time, that like that has been really effective on to me of like, okay, that's how I do like I should do magic items. Because for me, the 2 ways I do magic items is, does it make you feel more attached to the concept of your character in some way?
Yeah.
So
I like
that's
that.
like the crossbow or whatever. And then the other one is going back to what you were saying, Franco, about game breaky stuff. I just attach pre-written, especially in 5e, like pre-written feats into them, so that you're like, the designers have already accounted for.
Have they?
I mean, like, there are no feats that are like completely break the game, except for maybe lucky and like. Oh, is there other ones? I don't.
Sentinel
I
and
wouldn't
Polearm
know.
Master.
I only talk about games in a general sense. But I would imagine that some games probably have elements that.
I love saucy Shade.
Yeah, Shade that's lost his last rope. Yeah, but yeah. So I think that because the biggest like movement thing in the feat list is mobile, which doubles your movement speed or something like that. Which is still powerful. But if you have like a dagger that doubles your movement speed, that's interesting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can also, as a DM who's creating these items, you can say like, okay, I'm only going to put certain feats onto these. Like maybe you take one that's like spell initiate that allows you to like add a couple of spells to a spell
Magic
list.
initiate.
Yeah, magic initiate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for like a non-casting character, that's like really interesting to be
Getting
able
a free
to.
cantrip is like.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, this changes everything, and then like that becomes like a very cool thing, but it doesn't actually give you too much because cantrips are balanced to be not crazy.
And
you know.
If I'm a player and I'm a shit.
Whoa, you
Sorry.
just had panic in your eyes as you lost your train of thought. Did you just Mitch McConnell at me right now?
I did. I totally mixed. What I was gonna say is like, as a player, like visually, I think like my characters have like fun, like little unique attacks, or like, because I picture it as like an animation. Like if you remember like a Saturday morning cartoon,
Like an anime?
like an anime, where like the characters.
Everything is anime.
But like Brova had a lightning spear.
Yeah.
And like that wasn't like game breaking or like anything, but like that was like I felt really good that Brova had a way to attack that was unique to other characters that I played in the past. Whereas Valen had similar, but like his spear does more of like a thunder damage, and it's more like a shock and awe attack versus Brova's like long distance magic attack. So it's like magic items should also like give you a chance to flesh out your character's personality and style, as well as, you know, having a game mechanic.
I also
game
really
mechanics.
love taking normal weapons. Like you can have a dagger. Like when I was playing my first rogue, Bill, I was like, I kind of want him to be like a dagger person. But then I was like, the rapier is like the only weapon that you can actually use in a way that feels.
In 5th edition.
Yeah, in 5th edition,
the
it
only
feels
D&D,
good. Yeah, it's as we only play D&D at this table. But the rapier is the one that like will give you the most bang for your buck. I would have loved, like, even if the magic item was a dagger that functions the same way as a rapier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're still attacking at 5 feet, but it does a D8 instead of a D4.
Yeah.
And like it's a finesse weapon or whatever. And you just kind of make
It's
that.
just, you know, it's the
Weapon damage
stupid.
mechanics are like something that I really kind of like don't like.
Oh man,
Yeah, I don't like
hate
it
them.
either.
Having
Yeah.
it do 2 harm instead of 1 harm, you mean?
What do you mean?
Like
oh
the-
yeah,
the deck- okay.
like, exactly.
Yeah, he means like a lot of harm versus like a little bit of
okay.
harm.
Well,
Cool,
this
cool,
is
cool.
the exact thing in like Monster of the Week when you build it, you can still follow some of the tenets where you could just take a move from another class and be like, if you are looking through these goggles, maybe you get like the clairvoyance move from like the psychic class.
Ooh,
or
that's
whatever.
fun.
You know,
I just wanted to relay a story about a magic item that I gave some characters, and it was a lantern full of blood that would boil if there was undead nearby.
That's interesting.
And and one of the characters decided to become a vampire, and so now it is completely useless as a magic item, and it's my favorite thing.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also love that because you gave all of us in our Waterdeep campaign shade a item that is essentially a rapier of vampire detection, so it glows like very much like Sting from Lord of the Rings. That is also kind of useless to us because one of our characters is a damn
True.
which I just think
But it was
like
a fun
great
way.
plot moment.
It was also a way to narratively reveal that character
Agnostically.
Yeah, and then like because I had no idea that was coming, and then Greg was like, "Yeah, I punch a hole through one of these paladins." I was like, "What the fuck?"
I
Drink their blood.
Yeah, and I ripped their throat out with my fangs.
Yum. Scrummy.
But so when you're like
Slurp, slurp.
when you're building a custom one, I've talked a little bit about some of the things I think about. But what about you guys? It doesn't matter what system. But like, what are you thinking of when you sit down and you're like, it's time for one of my characters to get a magic weapon, or I want a magic weapon to exist in the world. Like, how do you even start thinking?
From
about it?
two perspectives. One is what's going to be good for the player character. Like, what are they trying to highlight about their character, or what do they want to like make more efficient? Like, if you have a character who's like, oh, I have 2 attacks and I'm like dexterous and fast. All right, give them a weapon that adds an extra attack. Give them a 3rd attack. You know, that's how fast this weapon moves. Or I think about it from like who built it and why, and what does it relate to like the world at large? Like, what was it supposed to do, and then what will the players be able to do with it if they get it? Yeah. And kind of think of it from like those two perspectives.
I would agree with that. And along with that, how do they find it? Where are they going to find it?
Ooh,
How do they acquire it? You know, a lot of times the story of the magic item is questing for it in some fashion, and that's one of the more memorable things.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
Well, that just made me remember this this game. Yeah, it's a 1-player game. It's called Artifact, and you're basically making a magic item. You're like playing as the magic item and going through all of like the people that have held it and wielded it, and like all the different like times it was like inert. So that's a really cool game to pick up if you're interested in making like a really unique, interesting magic item.
I love that.
Yeah, I definitely want to play that.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet.
My favorite magic item in 5th edition D&D is the Moonblade.
Oh.
Where like
It shows your butt when you wield it.
Exactly. That just it tickled me on my most immature level. But no, every time like you find one, you roll how many people have had it. Because every time it's wielded, it gets a new rune and a new magical effect.
Oh, that is sick.
So, like, if you roll it and you roll a d6 and you get a 6, like, 6 people have had this, you roll 6 magic effects to put on that sword.
That reminds me of a different thing that I think this was from Prismatic Wasteland, which is a blog that I follow. I think it is. But they laid out, like, different ways of advancing, and one of those ways being, like, improving your weapon.
I was about to bring this up.
Like leveling up your magic items.
I think that even like leveling up your common items into something that's more magical, like,
and then that way it's like I've had this knife with me my entire life, and then there's then you're creating the story with it. I don't know. That's very fun.
I really love the idea because like I've always been obsessed with that in like video games and stuff. The idea of like, I will take a suboptimal item or whatever if I'm like, this is the one that I've been using.
This thing is so cool.
Yeah, this thing's cool, and like it's part of me now. Like I want to use it, and I think that
it's the worst part about The Witcher.
Yeah, like you're constantly throwing shit away.
Yeah,
I think that in TTRPGs you really have an option to be like, you know, like. My sword I've been using since session 1 just got broken because of like some, you know, hardened skeletal frame that it hit or whatever, and it just chipped and now it broke. And it's like, no, I'm going to reforge this. I'm not going to just let this go and buy a new one.
The blade that was broken.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the reforging, it like now it casts off light whenever it gets around like skeletons or something. You know, like stuff like that that could be really fun. I think that
little minor effects and just sort of like give it some flair.
Yeah. And it just like you can throw a cantrip in it if you want.
But I feel like I'd like to play a campaign that kind of works, like since I'm talking about video games, like the Ratchet and Clank series, where there's just so much items you can find, and then there's like upgrades to those items that kind of make them a little bit better. And so like the game becomes not how many levels you can get, but how many of these weapons you can get to their like full potential.
Yeah. Right after this break, I want to pitch you guys an idea because I think that just kind of made me interested in like what you guys think about this. So we're gonna listen to some messages, and we'll be right back after this.
Some stories are epic tales for the ages, hours of content, sprawling narratives that pull you in and consume years of your life.
This isn't one of those stories.
Join the creators of Game Master Monday and Slay the Stars with a special guest from Lost Guide Games as they take you on a journey of hope and desperation.
Using the Arc Doom TTRPG system, Bella's Comet is nothing like you've experienced so far.
Because there's a twist.
And the clock is ticking.
Episode 1 of Bella's Comet releases on October 4th. Listen in on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, we're back. We're talking about magic items and...
Hey, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Thanks, magical stew pot or whatever you decided to be.
What's that cauldron that always fills up with stew? I want to be that. Everyone needs to eat.
Stewie the Cauldron.
Before the break, I kind of teased a thing that I want to pitch out to you guys. What do you think about making a magic item that has sort of like a technology tree on it that people can choose to go down it?
Okay.
And like, so like in the Ratchet and Clank games, you can like specialize items to be like, I play with it this sort of way, so I'm going to make it a faster shooting.
I've prototyped this exact system, but
really?
I've never liked it enough to like actually put it into real life.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you have a sword, and I was like, okay, now it's going to be a magical sword. Do you want it to become a +1 weapon, or do you want it to become like a D6 of elemental damage
or whatever,
weapon, and kind of like how do you want to flow down? Because once it becomes like, oh, if you pick a fire weapon, all right, at the next tier, do you want to become fire resistant, or do you want to be able to shoot a cantrip?
Or you could even go the like a
Never
way of
do
like
+1.
It gives elemental damage is the first thing. It's like becomes like a magical damage, fire magical damage is what it deals now, but no other changes. Then the next one is like it does like an extra D6 of fire damage, and then the next one's like it's an extra D8, but every time you hit something with it, you're like burning your hands with how hot it gets, so you take a D4 of damage or something.
Fuck.
Like you could like really like keep it going so that the tree ends with something like pretty crazy, but that maybe it has a drawback. You know what I mean? So.
I like that. That's fun. It becomes like out of control.
Yeah.
Or-
It's like
yeah,
this
like
thing is getting too crazy.
I love like, oh, you can have one perk or 2 perks and a drawback to be like, how much do you want to risk to keep moving forward on this?
Because Franco, you do this all the time in like Cairn and all that kind of stuff.
What
Where
are you talking about?
like you're like, oh, it's a magical spear. Do you pick it up? And you're like, yes. And it's like, oh, it does magical damage. And then like you throw it, and then it comes back point first at you, and you're like, oh shit. And you're like, yeah, that's the drawback. That's the curse that's on this thing that also does more damage.
Yeah, that's a
so
fun
I feel
spear.
like you balance things that way too.
Well, that's just cursed.
Yeah, it's just like a trap.
Yeah, it's just a trap. What were you going to say, Shade?
I was just going to say, I think one of the, like, I like this idea a lot. I also kind of, it's tricky because it gets into that idea of how gamified do you want it to be? Yeah. And like my little stupid brain was immediately going, okay, how are they learning that information that it's going to also have this... they can make this choice. Is the sword conveying it to them? Are they?
The sword came with a receipt.
Are they master
You
artificers?
learn how to read it.
Do they have an artificer who kind of lays it out for them?
Maybe that's like part of the setting or something like that, where it's like, yeah, everyone's born. Sorry, I just thought of like some like divergent shit or something like that. It's like nobody's been born with a spear before. Like everybody is like, yeah, you just know that's like part of the world.
Yeah.
All weapons have like a little like pearl that holograms the information, and you go, oh, I want to go this way.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, swipe left on that, swipe right on that.
But it could also be like you can like rune like in your dreams, like runes like appear around you, and one says berserker, and another one says protector, and you get to like you choose one of these,
Kingdom
and you
Hearts.
don't even and you don't even know what the effect is going to be, but you go down the path that makes sense for your character, and like maybe the berserker one is like you roll a d20 to do damage, but when stuff attacks you, you, they're rolling a d20.
What?
You know what I mean? Like it changes so that you're going to be receiving way more damage, but
One
you're
damage.
dealing way more damage. Also, the variance on a d20 dice would actually probably make
Even
it okay
out,
to do
yeah.
that.
Just say 2d10 maybe.
Yeah. But I think that like you could do it that way so that people aren't as metagamey and they can be like, okay, it makes sense. My character's like filled with rage.
That
I'm
kind
doing
of
barbarian.
that kind of makes me think like the Final Fantasy system where all weapons have like materia slots.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
in this world, all weapons have so many runes that they can like channel.
like in Witcher.
Or in The Witcher, yeah.
Yeah, slots.
I have never used a single slot on a weapon.
Holy crap! Why?
I just-
Wow, that
haven't
is
gotten-
suboptimal gaming.
we are going to talk about this
I
instead
just
of
because I keep finding new weapons, I'm like, well, I'm not going to waste these glyphs on this one. I'm just going to get a new sword.
You
and
get
like,
so many glyphs,
come
man.
on.
I have-
You get so
yeah.
many
no,
of
I
them.
do. I have 100 glyphs in my stash. I'm waiting to like get a sword that I'm going to keep before I use them.
No,
Just
dude,
use
you gotta
them.
just
I'm more-
burn them and
do,
turn
Do you
them.
ever combine the glyphs into better glyphs? Because I'm like, I bet that I can get 3 of these and make one bigger
I think
one.
that's a thing.
Not in this game?
I don't remember.
All
I
right.
don't think
I've played
so,
too many
yeah.
video games. I'm trying to like predict
Yeah,
the
no,
systems
just-
that might be present.
For later on.
You're far enough along that the systems
There's
are
no
there.
more.
yeah.
There are 2 new systems that'll get introduced that are in the DLCs, and you're not there yet.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
You're good.
And one of them is related to glyphs, but not in the way that you think.
One thing I want to pitch out there too is like
This was our Witcher corner. Thanks for stopping by.
a lot of systems out there have pre-made magical items in them, and a lot of them have like setting-based lore or have effects that are balanced for a game that maybe you're not really playing. How do you folks like think about that? Do you just always make custom magic items, or if you go into the book, whatever book it may be?
I'll usually look them up.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. A lot of people have done better work than I, so I
Sure.
just usually look
If
for
a
other stuff.
player wants a magic weapon that's published, I'm fine with it. But if I'm putting a magic weapon in a game, I might look through it for ideas. But I want my magic weapons to be unique to my games. I don't want to be like, oh, you find the elven boots of speed that are in page 35 of this book. Or like, I don't want that. But if my player's like, oh, I really want these boots, well, great, they exist. We'll find a way to get them to you, but I'm not going to make it.
Yeah, right. What about you, Shade?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say both. I like to create magic items, but it's, like you said, Franco said, people have created things better than I, so why not? But it does kind of, to Daniel's point, depend on what the setting is. So, I may not want in a world that doesn't have in a world that doesn't have this or that god or this or that hero in its history.
Let's not bring up gods again.
Then I don't want to be too wild with that.
Lacrosse poles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
the lacrosse bowl of catching.
and so I might limit those items. But generally speaking, I would just say, oh yeah, I'll just rename it.
Yeah.
You have it. It's just called this instead.
One other
Yeah.
thing that I think about a lot is that magical items, when you go through most of the books that you might be using to run a system, a lot of them really affect the kind of game within the game, which is combat, either armor or weapons and things. Do you guys have a way of creating something, and this is going to what you were saying at the beginning, Shade, of like story items? Do you all have ways of trying to create an item that really isn't meant for combat but is still exciting? And if that is the case, then
for
how
sure.
do you go about creating something in that way?
I just look for them.
In my
Again, I'm not super creative with them, but I think they're so much more interesting than combat stuff. Like I feel like get like your cool sword or cool spear or armor or whatever, but I don't know, the extra stuff that does like non-combat stuff is so much more interesting. Yeah.
One of my favorite magic items that I've given a party was called the Siderat, which was just a wagon that had 8 sort of paraspatial rooms inside of it. And that way each member of the party had their own room inside the wagon. And it had nothing to do with combat. And it really didn't help them travel much faster. But it was like, here's this like thing that's unique to you as some players that's special for you to just travel with. And it's like a little home. And it's like a little magic item just sort of like ties everyone together. And then like when the game became extra planar, we exploded the wagon and then turned it into a planar ship. And it sort of like grew with the party and kept going on like the adventures that they needed to go to. And that was always like, I really enjoyed like making the Sidrat and just like having it there for like the whole campaign.
Yeah. I mean, I would do, say, something similar to that. I had, and this may have been in an actual play as well, or a variation of this, I'm not sure. But I had given a group something called a pocket door. I called a pocket door. It was this door that would, go down to the size that you could fit into your pocket, kind of like your smartphone, right? But they could activate it so that it would pop up into a standing door of a normal size. They open it, and inside is a lovely little hut, a la Howl's Moving Castle. And it's clearly somewhere. It's not like in an empty space. It just happened to be this actual hut that existed somewhere in the world. Whenever they would open the door, it would just be back to wherever they were originally. So that was an adventure in and of itself, figuring out what was going on with that. So
I thought you were going to say there was a pocket door where they could take the door out and put it on a wall or something and be able to open through the whatever surface that they put on.
That would be fun too.
I was like, wow, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's another thing is looking at general. If your system has things that are like skills or abilities that a character can do that are not combat related, but might be tied to specific character playbooks or whatever. I like making magic items that essentially take that, especially for a group that maybe lacks that playbook. So we didn't have in our Monster of the Week game, Lakewood, we didn't have the the cursed, the one that the wronged. The wronged, thank you. We didn't have a wronged, so having an ability from the wronged as a magic item would be interesting to me. So I do try and do that, but I also want to create something that is convenient. And convenience, I think, is maybe the best way outside of combat to think of magic items.
Yeah, and we did that for you in Lakewood, where it was like you had this big silver broadsword that you'd carry around your back, and like its main power was that people's like attention would just kind of slide over it, so that they could.
That was because we created that item using the Monster of the Week rules, and that was the item, and I called it Oblivion, I think, because people just couldn't see it.
Also, it's great if the magic item is inconvenient. I once had someone with a sword that attracted like little shining sprites, so the weapon would just have little glowing fairies around it all the time.
I love that.
And they just every day we would roll to see like if more came, and so eventually he was just like swarmed by lights and he couldn't hide, and people were like, "You're always like." Surrounded, so it was like he really like but the weapon was like did enough damage, it was really good. Like I will just deal with this. He was like a barbarian and like really like bulky. It was like, oh man, this is weird. I don't like
love it.
I have a magic weapon that it's a magic weapon I gave one of the characters and they hate it, and it's a blade because he likes to use pole arm, so I made it like a blade. That he could stick onto a pole arm if he wanted to. But it's a pole arm that talks to you and whispers to you until you feed it blood. And if you don't feed it blood, it keeps you from sleeping and resting because it's continually whispering to you.
Hey,
you busy?
Hey,
what you thinking about?
I'm a little hungry.
Freed me. They fought the last time we played. They fought a gravity tyrant, which is a monster from Vaults of Varn. That I modded for 5e, the only version of D&D that exists. That's a joke. I don't really believe that. But he had the opportunity to throw the weapon into the gravity tyrant because it keeps like, it's a gravity tyrant, so it keeps drawing things into itself and like destroying them or whatever. And he was like really thinking, he almost lost his spear, which he liked. And so he was like, wait, could I just throw the sword in there? I'm like, yeah, you totally could. I'm fine with that. He didn't. He ended up not. But it was like, oh, that would have been a really funny way to solve your I hate this fucking sword problem.
I have a magic weapon that I gave one of the characters. And they fought a gravity tyrant, which is a monster from Vaults of Varn. That was a gravity tyrant, so it keeps like,
Yeah, I think that it's interesting if there's like a give and take, so that it's not just a net good. There's like just something about it that just makes the game a little bit more complex and interesting. Is always fun. I also really like the X-ray ring that I have in Waterdeep, which is like really great for my character who's an investigator and is like, when I pop down into a place, I'm like, okay, I want to investigate, but I just want to look through all the walls so that I can kind of get a sense of my situation, which feels very thematic, but is not anything to do with combat. You know what I mean? It can be sometimes if I'm like looking at a wall, I'm like, oh, there's 500 goblins in there.
Oh, remember that time you stole that pocket watch?
Yeah.
From a celestial being?
Yeah.
And that just told you how soon the next cataclysmic event was to occurring?
Yeah.
And they're like, that did nothing for anyone except create existential dread.
And also the next thing was like a few sessions later, the angel that I had pickpocketed off of was like, hey, you got me thrown out of heaven because you stole my pocket watch. Give that shit back to me. I have to stay here for 500 years without being corrupted. Do you know how hard that is? It was great. It was very funny.
Great story moment.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys. I talked about this off mic. But in Mouse Ritter, and I think Karen too, and a lot of like Into the Odd like games, there are magic items, like they're like relics basically, and they act like, single use or multi-use, like, kind of like magic items. They could be combat oriented or not. But one thing that a lot of them have in common, or almost all of them have in common, is that they have a recharge requirement. Yeah. So like, you have to put this in the trunk of a tree, like a hollow in a tree for like a night or something, or you have to sleep with this under your pillow, or you have to put this in a fire or something like that.
I really like that as like a mechanic.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a way to make it feel more like flavorful and more, what's it called? Like connected to the world.
Yeah, it's better than this. This weapon can now be used because it's been a day.
Yeah,
it's better.
Like dawn happened, and now you get it back. And
unless it's like it absorbs the light of dawn, and then that's what.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah.
But like I will say that one thing about magic items that I'm very conscious of, and I try not to put too much of this into my items if I make them myself, which is that like how much maintenance and upkeep does it require? Like when it comes to this stuff, it's like we're in the Underdark. Or maybe we're in a city. There are no trees, and we're really doing this thing in there. That means I can't recharge it, so I have to change my character sheet. And I have to take off like these +1s or whatever it is.
Oh, well, just don't make it that complicated.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. It just always works or whatever. But yeah, you can also make it so that's...
Yeah, I think that's why I think I kind of mentioned this under my breath or something, plus items are not that interesting. Like it's like, oh, now it's like a +1 to your AC or a +1 to your attack or whatever. It's just not as interesting.
Yeah, I think that those are really in the games, specifically 5e, the only D&D game that exists, because like certain monsters are basically unhittable if you don't have some of those pluses, unless it's like a wild chance to, like a
D&D can be very numbers based.
Yeah, right. So I feel like if you're in a system like Cairn or Monster of the Week or whatever, you can start doing some of that without having
more interesting things.
Yeah, make it without like having as much math involved in like balancing. Like, oh, if they don't have a +3 by the end of their campaign when they're level 20, I actually can't use
bloat.
I can't like use certain things, or if they don't have a magically bladed weapon, it's like, oh, you're just not going to damage anything anymore.
Yeah,
there's like some stuff like that.
I feel like the only reason that magic items have those benefits is just because of all the bloat that happens at higher tier play.
Yeah, that power creep starts getting real deep at like 15.
Yeah.
I'd say 10.
That'd be fun. What
would be fun, Daniel?
A Mario Kart item system.
Sure.
Where there was this, you get random items every session.
Yeah.
And you just figure out how to use them.
A table to roll on.
Yeah.
You get this shell that you throw it at, it's going to find the nearest shopkeeper and hit him in the head.
Oh my god.
It's like, why would I use this?
The Taverner. It's a sword The Taverner is a sword that takes you to the nearest... it points you to the nearest pub.
That's fun.
Tavern, yeah.
You like spin it on the ground, just like ding.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it that way.
It's like a magic bottle, and when it's empty, you're just like, oh, it's empty, and you make a wish, and you get teleported to the nearest.
Sure, something like that.
You could also. What do you guys think about the mysterious magic item Do you like those in your games where it's like
items that you need to figure out what they do?
And it could be like, let's say, that, for example, the bottle that when you finish drinking it, it teleports you somewhere. And people are like, maybe it's like a potion, drink it. And they do drink it and blink, they're gone. And everyone's like, what the fuck? Like,
oh, it's a potion of invisibility.
Yeah, something like that. But like, do you guys put stuff in your game where the characters do not know what this item does or what the implications of it
because
are?
I hate that. If I have something like, what does it do? You don't know. How can I figure it out? You don't know. You have to just try different stuff. I'm like,
yeah.
If I have a magic item, just please let me know what it does.
Yeah.
And so I try to do the same things. Like, here's your magic item, and then here's what it does so that you know.
Yeah.
I would sometimes hide things like that. It really depends, what system you're playing. But if they have a way to, I mean,
no, he would never.
It's one of them. One of the systems someone could play. Yeah,
he could never. Yeah.
But there may be like a way to discover magical properties, like maybe some sort of
identification type of spell.
Yeah, maybe like that.
Sure.
And
like if you were to play in 5e.
Every time somebody casts identify, I'm just like, oh my god, fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's so annoying.
Yeah.
So,
it's like, don't you want the wonder?
Yeah, the mystique.
There could be ways to do that, but maybe the system doesn't have that, or your players don't have access to that kind of magic. I do think that there is an interesting element to kind of discovering that, and curses often in a lot of these games are those hidden things. You don't necessarily know what the curse is right away, but it has to be something that is attainable. I've definitely played in games where I will never know what this item does, and that is frustrating. Yes, you detect a magic upon it, but what that magic is, I don't know. Great. How do I find it out? You've got to give your players a quest to find it out.
Yeah, I think that, so in Lakewood, I had the lantern that you guys were like, I don't know what this is, and you never really found out like what made it or what it like specifically was.
It
was
but tied to Moldoth.
Yeah, and you sort of had this thing where it's like you didn't really know what it did, but then there was an example of like when this like kind of evil energy was around, it would flash out and disrupt it, and you guys were like, this is useful.
Yeah, very useful.
And then it became a thing that was like used even though it wasn't like completely understood, which is sort of the purpose of
it's like me in math.
Yeah, and so like you kind of can use it that way, but otherwise, I kind of agree that like unless you are trying to create a story moment with an item, just tell people what it does. Find a traveling artificer that's like, oh, this is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as a DM that I find or a GM, that I find very difficult to do is try to find out how to convey that information to the player without having them attune to it or having them, whatever attuning means, or like having to use identify. The other thing I don't like about identify is that you can cast it as a ritual, and it's just like, oh great, this costs you nothing.
Yeah.
Like all it did, it cost you time.
I would never talk about 5e.
Oh man, he really wants to.
But I would point out that in every system, because you've just said it, Nick, the resource is time. That's a lever you pull. Time is valuable, and time can mean quite a lot.
I just fixed it for you as well. So if you were like, maybe in D&D 5e, if you were to have an item like this.
Never heard of it.
Maybe the item in itself, whenever someone tries to cast Identify, casts Counterspell. It's just like it flashes out and people are like, what the? And it's like it's interrupted. You don't know. It doesn't want to be like.
It's hilarious.
It has a ward of Counterspell on it.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, like literally, I was playing in the game.
That sounds dangerous as hell too.
Yeah. I found it was a really fun game that I was playing with a friend of mine who there was this like floating like party palace essentially that was happening, and as one of the protections in the palace from thieves, there were these little scarabs on the wall that whenever someone would cast a magic spell in a room, it would flash out a counter spell and you would just like waste your spell slot until you like found it and like took it and threw it into a different room or whatever.
Cool.
But yeah, just take like sort of like a counter spell component.
It'd be
slide
funny
it in.
is if that magic item, all it did was cast counterspell.
To identify. That would be such fun. It's like
that would be funny as hell.
Fuck, man.
It just does not want to be identified. It's like the Book of Secrets, and the secret is like it doesn't want to be.
I would love to see like
so
in a game
funny.
where like you can turn counter spells or certain spells into like oils, So you made an oil for the weapon and you polished it, and that way it would...
Someone's been playing Witcher.
I've been playing a lot of Witcher.
Yeah, I mean, you could put like green flame blade as like green flame oil, and you put it on and it like lights it up or
That'd be
whatever.
sick.
Yeah.
I think green flame blade should just be an oil.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a
Yeah.
spell. It should just be like, this is like a fucking cool thing that I can do. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
you prepare with it kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
You know, if you go into another system, it just can be, or it can
Yeah,
be a magic
exactly.
item that you prepare.
God.
Yeah.
I remember when I was playing an Eldritch Knight, I got so mad at Green Flame Blade being like a cantrip that I couldn't also attack with. I couldn't attack
It's a confusing spell.
Yeah.
with, like, because it was like, oh, you make a melee attack. It's like, but I have 2 attacks. Well, you can use the cantrip or you can make 2 attacks.
Yeah, because if
can't
you
do
think
both.
about the actual like mechanical thing that it's doing, it's giving you this potential bonus, but it's also taking your action economy way down because you basically have to use a full turn to use it.
Right.
So it's sort of like,
Not
is
worth
this
it.
worth it ever? It's like maybe if you need a magical weapon to fight with or something, but
Not for me.
You still used it a bunch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did. I remember
After
that being
5th, I
your...
guess.
Yeah.
Not. You still used it a couple times after
Couple
5th
of
level.
times, based
After
on
you
like
got your
what I
second
needed
attack.
to do.
Yeah.
But like most of the time, I thought the extra attack was worth more of my time.
All right, anything before we wrap up about magic items that you really want to get off your chest? No? Okay.
I created a whole faction in my world to just deal with it.
Oh, yeah, the
That's how I
consortium,
solved
right?
it.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Like everyone knows what magic items do because there's a group that studies it and lets people know.
That's what they do. Yeah, that's what their dirt job is. I do think like having a traveling artificer of some
So
sort.
it just keeps coming by like a tinker that's just like, hey, it's nice seeing you guys. So
Legitimately-
weird.
How you doing?
When you said that, I immediately thought like a small little mouse that was like that could talk to the party, and like the mouse could
cute.
like just I know what this does.
That's wonderful. I was gonna say I have a game that I used to run and may one day run again, and a system to be
and what's the
specified.
The once in future.
It was a future game.
They have this artificer who is definitely in a relationship with one of their characters' mothers at this point as well. Like, you know, he's going to become their stepdad or something.
okay.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
But he wasn't there previously, but now he's like such an integral part of their group, and I love that guy.
I love the idea of your mouse thing kind of sparked an idea in me that like, what if all animals just kind of knew this stuff, and when you cast speak for it with animals, the birds are like, flame comes out, blade scary, stay away from blade. And you're like, oh, it's a blade that lights
Oh
up.
my god, yeah, like all the animals have magic item intuition.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I was picturing Beetle from Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
When he just like pops out a tray and he's like, hey,
Yeah.
how you doing?
Or like the Tinker's also in Name of the Wind.
Name of the Wind? Yeah, I was
Or
thinking
just
about
sort
that
of
one
like,
too.
They're
Yeah.
kind of magic, but not really.
Yeah.
Kind of weird thing. All right, everyone.
Sick.
I think that we can, roll up our Tinker's stand, throw it on our back, and hit the road.
Yep. Jump into our bag of holding and
And hope it doesn't cast counterspell whenever you try to
Sure,
do
yeah.
anything. I'm doing that now. I'm gonna.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a really
It's like one of
hilarious
those little
item.
cat boxes.
Yeah,
right?
it's like it's like those boxes that press the button to close it again after you press the button.
Yeah, but except every time you like press the button, it siphons a little bit of your energy.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
I mean,
Because that's what spell slots are, right?
Yeah, you get frustrated enough with that box, it does siphon your energy.
Yeah.
So-
All right, everyone. We are a tabletop podcast, as you know, but there are a ton of other podcasts on the Helios Network, which Tabletop is a proud member of. If you want to go check out some of the other podcasts, you can go and check out Master and the Debaters, a debate show where they talk about stuff that truly does not matter, but have strong opinions about, kind of like us and Pantheons. Wait until you hear that episode, everyone. Everyone, we will see you next week for another episode of Tabletop. Bye.
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 Bye.